Welcome, Andrew. I'm glad to have you back on the show again. How's it going?
It's a pleasure to be here, man. I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, man. I can't complain. It seems like since the last time we've talked, so much has changed. I just remember the last episode you were on was episode 60, which was such a while ago, it seems, but that was only last year, in July. So I'm definitely happy to have you on again and to have your expertise for sure. So within today's episode, everyone, what we're really going to tap into is just some of the changes that we're seeing with the future of work and how business leaders need to actually adapt to these changes that we're going to see in the workforce, as well as really having a elaborate discussion around diversity and inclusion and just some of the challenges that we also see when it comes to Blacks within corporate America. So if you all can continue to like, subscribe, and share this video, don't forget to hit the notification bell. It's greatly appreciated. And if you're listening on a podcast, continue to rate, leave a review, and share this with your family and friends. So Andrew, to get things started, since the last time we talked last year, we've seen a lot with just the economy recovering from the pandemic. There are many people like myself that's still working from home. And then there are also a lot of companies out there that are searching for talent and hiring actively. So with that being said, what are some of the changes that you're seeing with the business environment that's requiring leaders' attention when it comes to business culture and driving employees' retention?
Yeah, so first and foremost, thanks again for the opportunity to be on today's episode. Very timely and relevant topics for sure. You know, the first thing that I think about is the Great Resignation. I think, you know, if you're familiar with kind of what's going on in the industry, you've probably heard of the Great Resignation for any of the listeners out there. And what's interesting about it is why people are leaving. You know, they're looking for flexibility. They're looking for growth. They're looking for a place where they're valued, where they're seen, where they're heard. And that's all diversity, equity, and inclusion really is, right? And that's what good culture that leads to employee engagement really is. So I think what we're seeing now is people realizing I have options. I'm no longer bound by what is geographically near me. I can work for a place across the country and go to my office in my house, and that's perfectly fine. That opens up the opportunities that exist, which I think leads to a lot of people transitioning, maybe even leaving industries entirely. So I think you're just seeing a lot of shuffling and reshuffling going on because people are tired of the status quo and have realized that there's other options that better suit their needs.
Yes, that's so true. I definitely think the flexibility and wanting to look for growth. A lot of people are starting to leave certain positions to search out for that. So that is so important. And kind of speaking on that, you know, I actually was doing some research online by McKinsey and Company. I'm pretty sure you're aware of what that company does. And they described how remote work and virtual meetings are likely to continue post-pandemic. And the research mentioned how 20 to 25% of the workforce could work from 3 to 5 days per week, which represents 4 to 5 times more remote work than before the pandemic. So I'm just going to show you a chart here, and I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on exactly how occupations are starting to change due to all of these changes that we're seeing within the workforce. So, Andrew, I wanted to ask, what are your initial thoughts when you think about remote work and virtual meetings and exactly what that means when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Man, excellent question. You know, one of the first things that come to mind is diversity. So one of the challenges some organizations have historically found when it comes to trying to diversify their workforce is the population that surrounds wherever their business is may not have the type of diversity that they're striving to obtain. So that can limit their options. I would argue there's other ways you can get that diversity by just broadening your lens and thinking about what diversity actually means. But even from a geographical standpoint, that was a limitation before. With remote work, that's no longer a problem. So you can be more targeted and who you want to bring on and what underrepresented groups of people you want to connect with in an effort to diversify your workforce. So that is one big change that I've seen when it comes to inclusion, and when it comes to equity. I think there's some important shifts happening, and it's going to take some time for us to fully see the impact of it. But one concern I have is certain underrepresented groups being excluded even more than before. Because now you have an environment where the people who are typically experiencing prejudice or microaggressions, macroaggressions are people in underrepresented groups. And now they have been able to have somewhat of an escape because they don't have to go to the office and be surrounded by people who don't understand them culturally or don't look like them or don't have the same beliefs they have. So there's actually a sense of relief from a lot of people in underrepresented groups by not having to go into the office. But one of the downsides of that is you miss some of that ability to interact with those key decision makers. And people have an opportunity to have stronger relationships that could lead to them having advancement in their career that you miss out on because you're not there to chat it up at the water cooler each day because you're at home. You know, I think about gender inequality and gender issues with, a higher percentage of women, taking care of kids at home, and that leading to issues with their career. And again, any underrepresented group is likely to fall into some of these pitfalls as a result of remote work. So I think there's certainly pros and cons to it, but one of my concerns is just some of the things we've already been battling getting worse. But on the flip side, I think some of the opportunities just exist with companies being able to tap into diverse talent that they wouldn't have otherwise been able to do.
Yeah, that's so true. I think there is pros and cons when you look to remote work and just learning from a virtual landscape. Some of the challenges that I also was looking at when I was on the website with McKinsey and Company was they talked about how there is a loss of effectiveness when it comes to like negotiations, critical business decisions, brainstorming sessions, and even onboarding new employees. When you think about that, how can leaders adjust to this change and help create more effectiveness with these areas virtually?
Yeah, you have to be intentional. And I think the small things matter. They mattered before we went remote or hybrid, whatever you want to call it. They're going to matter even more after the fact. So you talked about onboarding. Okay, so somebody would show up at the office pre-pandemic, and they would get whatever resources and training and tools and kind of the lay of the land, right? How do you make that process as tangible as possible and as impactful as possible when they're at home? So maybe you're thinking about packages being sent to that person's home. Maybe you're having the team be intentional with reaching out via phone, via text, via Zoom, via Teams, etc. Just finding different ways to have moments, whether it could be as simple as, hey, we're sending coffee out to everyone on the team, and we're going to start our first call with coffee and share gratitude. Just finding ways to connect, even though you're not physically in the same room. I think that's going to be super important.
Yeah, and that's the biggest thing. Like you said, being intentional and kind of like what you have also mentioned before on the podcast is like the people, the purpose, and the process, really just focusing on those three key areas, and that'll allow you to create that culture, virtually, and also with remote work, being able to adjust to that change. And I think another thing to keep in mind is also like just identifying which tasks, that can be done remotely without decreasing productivity and collaboration, really just identifying where you're at within your organization and seeing what things you can outsource remotely, and making sure that you still are intentional with that engagement from a virtual standpoint. And one thing I didn't really think about when I did some research on, and I would love to get your thoughts on it, is the article talked a lot about bridging the digital divide and how 20% of workers in rural households lack access to the internet. So can you kind of touch on as far as that challenge as well? from people that are working from home, and some rural households, they don't even have access to internet, and how business leaders have to adjust when it comes to that standpoint.
Yeah, man, we just talked about pros and cons to this hybrid remote work, and that's one of them. There's barriers that exist for some people to do effective work remotely, and that's a con. And it typically is people who are black and brown, right, and other minorities that are most impacted by that type of situation. So those things have to be solved for. So how do you address that? Well, as a leader, one of your primary jobs is removing obstacles to allow your team to do their best work. If somebody doesn't have basic necessities to be able to complete that work, that should be one of the first things you do to ensure you're providing an equitable approach to your team. Because not everyone on your team may need that type of support. But if somebody does, it's your job as a leader to meet them where they're at. And I think this takes being in tune with your team, being open-minded, asking really good questions, creating a safe space for people to actually share their thoughts and give you that feedback. And most importantly is acting on the feedback you get. I think that's going to be super critical. It's always been critical, but now that you don't have everyone in the same room at all times, communication just has to be A1.
Yeah, that's spot on, man. I think that recognition, and that goes back to what you mentioned before about appreciation, recognition, and what was the I? What does the I stand for?
Appreciation, inspiration, and recognition.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that plays such a good role on being intentional and just recognizing your employees. Now, I wanted to go over a few charts that was created by McKinsey and Company around the shifts in the different occupations post-pandemic. And before I pull up the charts, just kind of want to give you all an overview of what you're about to see. So they're pretty much highlighting how certain occupations that require more physical presence, such as more in-person interactions, are going to be replaced by artificial intelligence and automation to reduce costs. So things such as like customer service and sales roles, as well as less skilled office support roles. So I'm going to share my screen, and I kind of want to get your initial thoughts on this first chart here, and just kind of see how you feel when you kind of look at this. And just to kind of explain it, it's pretty much just showing here how, if you look at the top, a lot of the increase of the total employment, a lot of the positions that are going to have this shift, that more people are going to go to these type of jobs, is like health aides, tech workers, care workers, STEM professionals, which is science, technology, engineering, mathematics type of roles, health professionals and managers. But then as you kind of look towards the bottom, you can see some of the roles that I guess don't require as many skills, like customer service, food services. Those are going to be the ones that we're going to see a lot of shifts and changing when it comes to employment. And this is what they have predicted come by 2030. And as you look across a lot of the other countries like Spain, the United Kingdom, France, you can kind of see that across the board, the bottoms are going to be the ones that are going to decrease. And then the ones at the top are going to be the shift in occupations. So I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on that. Like, what do you think about that when you kind of look at this chart and you see how a lot of these occupations are going to change, and what business leaders kind of need to do to help their employees get those tangible and intangible skills that can help them in the workforce?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things, or a few things that come to mind. The first thing for me is I'm not surprised. When I see it, I feel like I kind of saw the writing on the wall. You kind of started to realize things were looking to get automated in manufacturing and some of these more administrative support functions. There's just other ways to streamline the work and make it more efficient, and that tends to be more profitable for companies, and that's why you're seeing these trends. That's one of the first things that come to mind. When I think about it from the standpoint of the people who are being impacted by this, my heart goes out to them, because if they haven't been looking at reports and pulling up McKinsey or watching the news, they may not have necessarily known this was coming. Potentially, they might have started to see more self-checkout lanes at the grocery store, or seeing seeing more robots at the manufacturing plant. But if you didn't, really do that research, there could be a level of being blindsided if you don't start being aware of the shifts that are happening in that industry. And I think some people are seeing that, and I think that plays a role into the Great Resignation or even the Great Reshuffle, as I've heard it, because some industries people want to get out of. I think about from a leader perspective, if you have an organization that is towards the bottom of this graph we're seeing in some of these segments, what can you do to still put people first? That doesn't mean not to make the decision that's going to be the most profitable for the organization, which may include automating some of the tasks, but how can you work to develop skills in the team you have to where whatever roles you now do have, you primarily start to try to fill those with people who are already on the team, right? How do you do things to, hey, even if it doesn't work out, let's help these people find jobs elsewhere. Imagine a company really investing in people succeeding, even if it wasn't with them. What type of reputation would they have? What would those individuals say to other people they encounter that could end up being employees or customers for the business? I think business leaders need to think long term about it. And if you're in an area where you're seeing a huge migration coming to your organization, I would just say don't skip over the basics. Don't get bored with the basics, because there's a lot of things happening. There's a lot of demand. You still have to take care of your people. You still have to give them inspiration. You still have to recognize them. You still need to train them effectively. And I think depending on where you fall as a leader, there's a couple of different things you can do to ensure your team still feels like they're number one.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think, just that additional training, managers and leaders giving their employees the ability to look at management positions and kind of like you said on the employees that are fall in the spectrum of the bottom part of the graph, just really focusing on those, tangible skills that you can get, those technical skills or certifications, things that can kind of prepare you. But I definitely do agree with the Great Resignation. A lot of people are just really tapping into the gig economy and looking at things that they can do on their own schedule outside of working like a typical 9-to-5 that I've seen a lot of people doing. But, I definitely think it's a prevalent, topic and an issue that a lot of people should pay attention to. And this second chart that I wanted to really just get your attention on is it's kind of really similar to the last one, but it's really just showing how, more people may need to transition to new jobs post-COVID, and how a lot of the workforce are going to transition to these jobs by 2030. And if you look at the United States, they pretty much have one of the bigger increases when you look at Germany, Japan, France, Spain. And like you said, I'm not surprised either. I know when I go to a lot of grocery stores, I've been noticing the automation and just, with different call centers, they're not really, they're trying to find ways to reduce costs, like you said, and reduce and increase their profitability. So I definitely think that it's a lot to pay attention to. And it's one thing that I really have thought a lot about. Now, I wanted to transition this conversation and just really talk about the aspects of the challenges that Blacks experience within corporate America. I think when we had that whole situation last year with George Floyd and the whole Black Lives Matter, we had a lot of companies came out and want to take the initiatives to put a bigger focus on Black representation in higher positions. But, when you kind of look at the numbers, it still shows that we still have a lot of challenges. So I actually do want to go through a few other charts with McKinsey and Company. And the first one I'm going to show you all is really going to detail Black workers being overrepresented in low-wage occupations, and they're underrepresented in high-wage occupations. So let me go ahead and share this with you, and then Andrew, I would love to get your initial thoughts on this as well. As you can see, the overrepresented occupations here, healthcare support, food preparation, transportation, and you can see the salaries on the right hand side. But as those salaries start to increase and you see the positions that require just more technical skills, more management, more marketing skills, we tend to be underrepresented when it comes to those different career opportunities. So, Andrew, can you kind of talk on that and just the challenges that you see as a person that's consulting and working with these different organizations about the challenges with Black representation in senior and even higher wage positions?
Yeah, man, it's a problem. It's a problem. LinkedIn did they did some research and produced an article that said it would take like over 90 years for us to reach the same percentage of Black senior leaders as we make up in the population. I feel like 95 years. Like in our lifetime,
Crazy.
it's not feasible. It's not feasible for that percentage to line up, right? So it's disheartening. It's problematic, and I think we have to be intentional. It's the only way we're going to change that. So, some of the other thoughts that I have is I think leaders need to recognize the importance of representation, first and foremost, to really be inspired and motivated to change it. Representation matters because representation inspires, right? It allows people to know that something's possible, to say, oh, there's somebody who looks like me, who comes from the same place that I come from, who has the same beliefs that I have. That is inspiring for somebody to see and can be a motivator to say, wow, I never saw myself being a CEO for a Fortune 500 company because I didn't see any Black women who are doing that. But now I see Roz Brewer leading Walgreens and being one of the highest paid CEOs, period. Now I think I want to do that, right? Think about President Barack Obama. How many people never thought it would be possible for a Black person to be president? Then he becomes president. How many people now believe it's possible just because they've seen somebody do it? So I think we've got to understand the power of representation and why it matters for attracting talent, retaining talent, productivity, engagement. I mean, you go down the list, there's real business consequences for people who continue to say that, representation is not going to be a priority. And I think one of the ways that leaders can improve representation is by going to different places to recruit, by attending different conferences and career fairs than maybe you would normally attend, and having some mentorship programs in place. Having an executive sponsor, an executive in the organization say, hey, I'm going to do roundtable discussions with some of the minority or underrepresented people we have in our organization. I'm going to give them game on things that I learned from my mentor and pass those things down. So those are just a few of the things leaders can do, but representation is important, and we're a long way away from where things need to be.
Yeah, I agree. And I actually seen that same report with LinkedIn about how it would take 95 years just for us to get to the level of other ethnicities when it comes to that representation. And it actually mentioned that in this article as well. And they hit on a couple of points here about how, with Black employees, when it comes to management, we're very underrepresented, and how there needs to be more initiatives. There needs to be more intention behind just a progressive path when it comes to all the way from entry level to managerial positions at the same rate as others. As you see here with a lot of white employees, they tend to take that over by a landslide, even the lower positions. So I just think with Blacks, Hispanics, it is a prevalent issue that we all are experiencing. And, this was one thing that stood out to me too, that how there are only 4 Black CEOs in Fortune 500 companies. So it definitely is an issue. But I think, like what you said, Andrew, them going to different career fairs and in different areas, maybe the rural areas that the people that don't have access to certain opportunities or don't have the resources, going into those environments and neighborhoods and teaching people and educating them on the opportunities that are available. So it definitely is a prevalent topic that needs to be worked on for sure. Now, I kind of also wanted to just get your thoughts on, you have been very successful with you working into an executive level position with Starbucks over 10 years, and having those experiences. So can you kind of talk about like what you have done to get to that level? And also, like, how is Starbucks diversity, equity, and inclusion programs of things that they have done in the past? Good.
Yeah, man. So I'm a man of faith. So first and foremost, it's been God opening doors for me. That is the reason why I'm here and why I have been able to walk through the doors that have presented themselves. So I would say that. The other thing that comes to mind is really just exceeding expectations. That's been my mentality. I had a mentor when I used to work for Aldi. So I worked for, been in retail management for, over 10 years, like you mentioned. I worked for Kroger, Aldi, and Starbucks. And one of my first mentors at Aldi, he said, this is when I was an intern trying to get a full-time offer. And I was asking for advice. What do I need to do to stand out? Like, what can I do to make sure I get the full-time offer? He said, just exceed expectations. Like, be super clear on what they are expecting from you at every stage in the game. And you do everything in your power to exceed that. If you do that, you're going to give yourself the best opportunity to land the role. But if you don't get the role, you still know you went above and beyond, which should give you a sense of satisfaction, like I gave it my all. And that really resonated with me, and I've taken that with me since then. So my approach has always been, what are you expecting from me? And really try to get that as clear as possible. And then how do I create a strategy to say, okay, if you're expecting this, how do I give you this plus these other things? And that will allow me to continue to differentiate myself amongst my peers and continue to rise in the ranks regardless of where I may be.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely think exceeding expectations, over delivering, especially as us being Black men, we already are, we already are battling against a lot of different things as far as just the inequalities that we see in America. So I think when you can exceed expectations and do things that they don't expect that you can do, is definitely one thing that I keep in mind. And I'm the same way, being a man of faith. I give all thanks to God just for all the opportunities. I wouldn't be here without him. And I think, giving him the glory is the most important before any of these other things that we get in life. So, I wanted to, also really touch on you're working on an educational series right now that's going to transition into your second book, The Building Blocks of Belonging. I think belonging, it really is important when it comes to that inclusion aspect of the DEI strategy, when you're looking at employees wanting to feel recognized, they feel wanted, and that they have equal opportunity in the workforce. Can you kind of talk about what you're working on and why people should be on the lookout for that?
Yeah, man. So really the building blocks of belonging started with a question. And the question was, when you have a diverse, equitable, inclusive culture, you're doing everything right, what does that lead to? Like what's the end result? What does it feel like? What does it look like? Just what does winning in that area mean? And that kind of set me on this journey of doing a bunch of research I'm still doing right now that will turn into my second book. But my initial stab at it is it leads to belonging, right? And if it leads to belonging, right, if we're talking about diversity being a numbers game and how we categorize different people, if we're talking about equity being removing obstacles and making sure it's a fair playing field so people can do their best work. And if we're talking about inclusion, meaning people feeling seen, feeling heard, feeling valued, the end result should be people feeling a sense of belonging. And when you have people who feel a sense of belonging with your organization, they're more engaged, they stay longer, right? And they do better work, and they tell other people, they speak favorably about the organization to other people. So it's a domino effect from a positive standpoint when you have belonging. So with that being said, how do you create it? How do you build it? And there's a couple things that I have, a big picture I'd love to talk about. So the bottom is really just cultivating culture. If you're looking at it through an organizational lens, through the lens of being a leader, you've got to make sure you start with culture. Why are we here? What are we trying to solve? What's our mission? What's our vision? What are our core values? Kind of what's our purpose, our foundation? You have to start with that as you're talking about belonging, because what are people belonging to? What are people connecting to, right? It's back to what your organization is looking to solve. So that's step one. Step two is emotional intelligence and leveraging emotional intelligence. I really feel like emotional intelligence is more important now than ever before. It's such a vital soft skill, if you will. But when we talk about remote, we talk about hybrid, it's so much more important to understand your emotions and understand the emotions of the people you're talking to, and ensuring people feel a sense of psychological safety where they can be vulnerable, they can challenge the status quo. That's what is in that second building block, emotional intelligence. Then you have stereotypes and biases, right? We all have bias. To be human is to have bias. So how can we understand that, acknowledge that, and then work to find ways to disrupt that bias that we have? And then start having conversations about the different biases that exist for various groups. There's age bias, gender bias, race bias, there's class bias, disability bias, right? There's so many different biases that exist, and until we have these courageous conversations about it, people are going to continue to feel left out and excluded, which is the opposite of what you want to have. So those are kind of internally facing, if you will, training and things to think about for organizations. Then you have the external piece, which are the last two building blocks, which is strategic partnerships, and the last one is ensuring equity. And when we talk about strategic partnerships, we talk about who exists, what organizations exist to support underrepresented groups that you're trying to connect with. Right, there's groups out there whose sole purpose is to uplift, inspire, equip these groups of people that leaders are struggling to find. Connect with those organizations, be long-term in your approach to establishing a relationship with them, and you're going to be well on your way to having a diverse group. And then the last block is ensuring equity. When we talk about ensuring equity, it's, hey, when we talk about DEI, equity is the most important, because if we don't have equity, people aren't going to look at it as a fair and just place to work, and they're not going to look at it as a place where they have flexibility and growth, which we talked about earlier today. So you have to ensure equity, and you do that by data, capturing data, taking action against that data, ensuring you have a DEI committee that's helping to work to drive the cultural change that it's going to take to really infuse DEI within a workplace, and just empathetic leadership as a whole. So those are kind of the 10,000 foot view overview of the building blocks of belonging.
Yeah, I love that. I'm definitely going to be on the lookout for it, and I tell everyone to stay tuned, because that I think that a lot of organizations can utilize that, or just people in general that are working for companies that want to have expectations of what they expect when it comes to the companies that they work for. I think the cultivating culture, the emotional intelligence, and the stereotyping biases, just being aware of those different elements. I mean, I can really see how all of those help with belonging, because it just really helps people feel more comfortable and being supported by their organizations when it comes to being their authentic self. So I definitely commend you on that, and I can't wait to see once it is all unfolded and out for people to read. Now, I've always wanted to ask you this. I know you're a keynote speaker. You've had a lot of great experiences with speaking on a lot of these different topics. And I would love to just get your thoughts on how you exactly got started with public speaking. And also, when it comes to public speaking and the credibility aspect, do you think it's important to have a book written before you get into public speaking, or does that not really matter? I know, you've had experiences with all those different things. So wanted to get your thoughts.
Yeah. So how did I get started? Number one, exposure to seeing my dad speak all the time. He's very active in church. He would volunteer to be a leader for whatever. So I would just grow up seeing my dad be at the front of rooms, like talking. All right. And at the time, I didn't think much of it. It's just what I was used to. But you start realizing, like, hey, I can do that too. That's normal to go up and get the microphone and speak in front of large crowds. Didn't make me feel any more comfortable doing it growing up, but I saw that. So I think that was like the seed that was planted. When I actually started like doing it myself, I would say that started in college with I went to college with this mentality of I'm going to be intentional about being uncomfortable and getting outside my comfort zone, because I recognize that that's where growth happens. So I remember the first time I really remember speaking in public was my psychology class freshman year. And the teacher was like, is anyone interested in doing a mock interview in front of the class for extra credit? And I'm like, I could use some extra credit, but also I committed to being uncomfortable. And this is one of those major, huge lecture halls at Indiana University. Shout out to Hoosiers, where I went for undergrad. And I raised my hand, and I was nervous, super nervous. I was shaking, the day of, got there, and I killed the mock interview. And I had people coming up to me afterwards like, man, you murdered it. I won. I did the best job of the group that volunteered. And that was reaffirming to me to say, you know what? You're going to be uncomfortable. Hands may get sweaty. You may be trembling a little bit, but you're always going to be harder on yourself than what everyone else sees. And that gave me the confidence to say, I need to continue doing it. And then I think about my time professionally. I was constantly leading team meetings and being in uncomfortable settings where I'm talking to large groups of people. Again, didn't make it any more comfortable, but I started to just practice and just do it. I read some books on it to think about the use of statistics and humor and all of that. And then I had to figure out what works for me. And for me, I realized that my confidence comes from preparation. So how do I make sure I kill it? Guess what? I'm reciting my stuff enough to where if the slide deck messes up, if whatever happens, I can at least stumble through it, right? It's not like the worst moment of my life. And that gives me confidence, because you just don't want to mess up. You don't want to look stupid. You don't want to sound stupid. You don't want to forget what you heard. And that was alleviated by the prep time that I put in. So I know that was a lot, but that was kind of my introduction to that. In terms of the book, I don't think a book is necessary to be a speaker. What I think is necessary is, in your mind, believing you're a speaker. I was calling myself a speaker before I was a speaker. Nobody was paying me to speak when I first labeled myself as a speaker. I just believed that I had something to say. Yeah. I had something to say, and I know I was going to work at it, and I know I was good at it, and I could add value, so I'm a speaker. And I started speaking for free. You could book me for free years ago, right? And I would speak for free. But what did that do? That gave me confidence. That gave me connections. That gave me people who said, Andrew's a good speaker. They don't have to say how much they paid me, because they didn't pay me. But I could say, hey, reach out to them. They loved my presentation. Now, it's my rate is it's 4 digits, at least for me to come speak, right? Years ago, it was free. So it took time, repetition, and just building confidence in my own mind that I was a speaker to effectively do it.
Yeah, I love that, man, because I think as long as you have a message and you have something that you want to speak about, a topic, your story, you've been through something in life, you can be able to get on stage and talk in front of thousands, millions of people. And that's my same type of mindset. I've always had different speaking opportunities, like in college, whether it was doing a presentation in front of a large crowd, but I want to actually, get into more financial planning, speaking, and just talking to different people, and starting off for free, because that was actually going to be the next thing I asked you. But I think that's how a lot of people start, because that helps with the repetition. It builds the confidence, and you're trying to see what works, what doesn't work. And then you start to build a catalog for yourself, and people that word of mouth starts to go out to other people. And then you can start to look at it as a business opportunity to actually have some booking sessions when it comes to people paying you to speak. So it's just great to hear that, man. And, I know yourself, you're a family man, you have 3 children, and you're also married as well. And I commend you on that, because I think that we need a lot more Black men that are married and have children, and that's passing that legacy down. I kind of wanted to just get your perspective on how is it balancing. I'm not there yet, but I want to get there. But how is it balancing just family life, entrepreneurship, and just thriving in a career? How is that on a day-to-day?
Man, it is hectic, chaotic, overwhelming, stressful, and beautiful all at the same time. I just have to. It's really work-life harmony. It's like there's going to be seasons of more work, and you're like, man, I feel I've been disconnected with the wife, or I'm missing out on certain things at home. I need to swing back the other side. So now I'm more present, and I'm putting some projects or things that I know need to get done on the back burner a little bit, or finishing that work in non-ideal times in order to prioritize the moment of being with family. So it's constant doing that. I would say setting parameters is important. So one thing that helps me is, so I go to church on Saturday, so I'm Seventh-day Adventist. So really from sundown Friday to sundown Saturday, I don't do any work. And it's really helpful because it allows me to not work 7 days. So I don't work on Friday night to Saturday night. And if I do anything remotely close to work, it's typically for like a nonprofit, some pro bono type of thing, speaking to kids. That's really the only type of exceptions I typically make. And that helps me to balance things out. So that at least gives me 2 nights where I can be with family, I can do something myself, etc. Therapy is a big thing. So I've had a therapist for a while now, and that's something I plan on having, hopefully for the rest of my life. I think it's just, you go to the dentist your entire life, you go to the doctor. I believe everyone should have a therapist, which helps with those types of things as well. And then just, you have to be good with time management. You have to be organized. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. When you have a 9 to 5 and you want to be present at home after work, but you got something you're trying to do on the side, 8 p.m. to midnight, 4 or 5 nights a week, that might be what you need to do to get to the next level. And those are the types of things that I've been able to do to lead to the success in managing everything.
Yeah, that time management, I'm sure, is vitally important. And, I also keep my Sabbaths on Saturday too. So it's good to hear that we share that similarity. My Sabbath starts, like you said, Friday sundown to Saturday sundown. So yeah. I think that's so important because, with us kind of saying throughout this podcast about us being a man of faith, I think that is a great opportunity for me to kind of reset and focus on the Lord and kind of just really not worry about nothing else. And it allows me in some way to just reset and re-energize for the coming days ahead. So I can see how that helps. And, it's just a blessing to hear that you keep your Sabbaths on the same days as well. Now, just as we're coming to a close, I know you're an avid reader. I love reading too. I would love to just get your thoughts on what are some books you're reading right now, some things that you've read in the past that you think will recommend people to read. What are some things that you've been kind of tapping into?
Yeah, so the book I just finished is from Harvard Business Review, actually. It's in their series, the Harvard Business Review 10 Must Reads. It's on my desk here. I just finished it today, actually. It's on emotional intelligence. So, we talk about the building blocks of belonging. I'm very much doing research as I'm writing. And one of the things I do with writing a book is I try to get credible sources. And I just read those sources, try to see what sticks out. What are some trends? What are things I'm seeing different authors say about it? And then what's my own take on it? What's my perspective? Mash that all together, and that's kind of how I form my concepts and my approach. So that's something I'm reading, emotional intelligence. I'm also reading about psychological safety right now because I think emotional intelligence and psychological safety are two of the most important things that leaders need to prioritize beyond like your purpose and kind of your why, because it literally is the foundation for teams to thrive. And things that we're doing in the next coming years are going to be more and more predicated on collaboration and team effectiveness. So if we're talking about a culture of belonging, those two things are super important. And that book is called The 4 Stages of Psychological Safety. And that's by Timothy Clark.
Yeah, I'm going to have to check that one out. The psychological safety, that's actually my first time actually hearing it, from the way you explained it. I can see why it's vitally important, but I think that emotional intelligence, like you said, it's a soft skill that, every leader needs to know how to relate, to their employees emotionally, because we all are going through things. And, especially with the pandemic, it put a bigger emphasis on emotional intelligence of, just people, not either losing their jobs or having a hard time finding opportunities, making those different transitions into different careers. So that emotional intelligence is so vital.
And I just wanted
Yeah,
to share something on psychological safety. I know you mentioned you're not super familiar with the term. You know, why it's so important is because a lot of the benefits you see from having a diverse, equitable, and inclusive culture shows up in retention, shows up in engagement, productivity, right? But it also shows up in innovation because you have people who are different, who come together trying to problem solve. You have less blind spots at the table when you're making these decisions, and you make better decisions. And organizations that make good decisions, they make good money, right? It's a domino effect. When you don't have psychological safety in the mix at a company, you're literally removing the opportunity for innovation to exist. Psychological safety is essentially when people feel safe enough to offer ideas, to speak up when they think things are going the wrong way, to challenge the status quo, to do all these things that help you make a better end product. When you have psychological safety, those things take place. When you don't have psychological safety, people they don't share their ideas, they keep to themselves, and it's typically rooted out of fear of retaliation, right, or some type of negative consequence of them speaking up. So it's super important. So it's really to get the benefits that come with DEI, you have to have a psychological safe work environment, or else you can get all the diversity in the world. If people don't feel safe enough to speak, you're not going to reap the benefits of that diversity. So.
Yeah, I can see now what you're saying, because it's almost like, it's not, when there's no psychological safety, there's no collaborative approach. It's just one person making decisions or management making decisions, but they're not encouraging ideas or feedback, or the employees may not even feel that they have a say in a particular subject or a work process. So I think it's creating that safety zone where all ideas are welcome. Everyone feels more comfortable and they can challenge the status quo and say things and speak up, which in result is going to create a more thriving business culture and really just help the end product to be more successful. So I can see the importance of a psychological safety environment. Now, just the last thing I wanted to ask is, how can people connect with you online? I know you do have a book already out with the Circle of Leadership. How can they go out and support that, and also all the things you do with consulting and speaking?
Yeah, you can reach out to me. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm also on Twitter, Instagram. If you go to my website, it's my first and last name.com, andrewadeniyi.com. You'll be able to link to all my social media. You can even submit a request there to connect. So that's one way. LinkedIn is another way. And then even email, which my email is also on my website. So I would say the website's is a convenient location to get access to all my content and all the different platforms that I'm on. But you can also see me on LinkedIn as well. And the book is available on Amazon. Yeah, the book is available on Amazon. Right. You can get it on the website, but you can also go on Amazon and search the Circle of Leadership, and the book is available there.
Thank you for sharing that, Andrew. And everyone, I'll put all of his information in the show notes with his website, and also being able to support him with his different social media outlets. And just want to tell you all, thank you for tuning in. Just continue to like, subscribe, share this video, continue to rate on the podcast, leave a review. It's greatly appreciated. And I thank you when you do take the time to do those different things. And thank you, Andrew, for coming on a second time. This one was longer, and I loved it every second. I think it was a lot of good information, and I do truly appreciate your time.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. It's an honor and a privilege to be here today, man. Keep up the good work with the podcast. Love the work that you're doing.
Appreciate you so much. Well, thank you, everyone, for tuning in to another episode, and we'll see you next time.